Hello and welcome to my studio. In this video I'm going to show you how I made this picture. This sort of image relies on the random nature of air expanding through a column of water. However, capturing it effectively requires good photographic and lighting technique. And in this video I'm going to show you exactly how I did it. Okay, so on this table, and you will need a fairly substantial table to do this, I'm going to place a fish tank. Here we are. Now besides this, you'll also need something to create the bubbles. So for that, I've made up this weight, which is just a piece of steel, and I've taped to that some flexible tubing. I'm just going to place that in the bottom of the tank. And then I'm just going to attach it to this air pump, like so. Now I'm using an air pump just for convenience. You could use an old blower brush bulb, for instance, or you could literally just blow down the tube. But this will be a little more consistent. Okay, so the next thing to do will be just to fill the tank with water. There we go, all full of water. I've used normal tap water, but it is slightly warm. It's about room temperature, and I've done that on purpose to stop the outside of the glass misting up due to condensation. Okay, so the next thing to do, I'm just going to place this lid just on the tank, just on the top here. There we go. And as far as the water is concerned, that's it, that's all done. So the next thing to set up would be a camera position. Now, due to the randomness of this type of photo shoot, I'm going to use a tripod. And I'm using a tripod which has a geared center column and also a geared head, which will allow me to precisely position the camera. So I'm just going to pop the tripod just in front of the tank here, like that. And for the camera, I'm using this medium format camera with a 120mm macro lens on the front of it. Now, this being medium format, the equivalent of that for a full frame would be somewhere around 75mm. Just gives you a bit more working distance between the front of the lens and the subject. Okay, so I'll just pop that on the top of the tripod. Now, this camera is tethered into Capture One software, so it's easy to follow the results as we go along. So I'll just turn the camera on. And there we are. The software has recognized the camera, and I can see here all the settings that I have on the camera at the moment. So it's in full manual mode. I'm using a shutter speed of 1/125th of a second. Now that's the flash sync speed for this particular camera. Yours could be greater than that. The idea is that you want to use the fastest speed, which will synchronize with your flash. ISO 100, and at the moment I have an aperture set of f/16. Now I've done that on purpose so that it will give me a relatively large depth of field. Again, at this sort of distance with this sort of subject, it's going to be tricky to get everything in focus, so a bigger depth of field would be better. f/16 is a good compromise. So with those settings, just with the house lights, what I'll do first is just grab an image just to make sure that I don't get any contamination from the house lights. And there we are. You can see that at those settings, I'm getting no image at all, which is precisely what we want. So now any light which I now add is the only light which is going to affect the subject. Okay, so the next thing to do will be to set up the shot. So what I'm going to do is just look through the viewfinder. So initially I'll just move that to the center or thereabouts, and I'll manually adjust the focus just to get me in the right ballpark. There we are, somewhere around there. Now you may have noticed that when I was looking through the viewfinder I could see a reflection in the glass here at the front. That should disappear once this is lit correctly. So that's the next thing to do. So first of all, I'm just going to put a softbox over the top of the tank. So this is just a 3-foot octabox and I'm just positioning more or less over the top of the tank. And I've got very little space between the actual top of the softbox and the tank itself. Need to make it as close as is practical, really. Okay, the other thing I've got on here is this old piece of rag just on the other end of the boom. It just stops you bashing your head into it. Okay, so with that all on, I'll turn the power pack on. Okay, so at an arbitrary energy level, we're just ready to grab our first image. Okay, so what I'll do, just do that. So that's actually looking reasonable as far as an exposure goes at this sort of level. What I'd like to do is just make sure of the focus around this point down here. So in order to do that, I'm just going to start up live view on the camera. So let's just do that. There we are. And just to help it along a little, I'm just going to turn on the modelling light on this flash head. There, that's a bit better. Just make this a bit bigger and we'll zoom into the area of interest where the bubbles will be coming out, just here. Now I'm just going to change the aperture from f16 just temporarily to the minimum for that lens, which is f4, which will give me the most precise focusing. So now if I operate the focus controls here, I can get a precise focus on that point. There we are. Something like that, I think. Okay, so with that done, I'll just put that back to f16 and we can dispense with the live view. And now we're ready just to do a bit of a test just with some air going through it. There we go. So with the air pump running, what I'm going to do is just grab an image and we'll see what we get. Okay, so we can see in here that we're getting some nice reflections and it all seems to be relatively well focused. Let's just zoom all the way in, we'll have a little look. Yes, there's lots and lots of detail in here, lots of things going on. It's possibly a little bright overall. I may adjust that and take it down a little bit. Okay, so I can dispense with the air pump for the time being, and we can set up the next part of the shot. In the original image, the background was a graduated blue from top to bottom. Okay, so for the background I'm going to use this piece of blue mount board and I've just put a couple of clips on the top of it here. Now what I'm going to do is just use this stand. So if I just pop that on the top here like so. And now put the whole thing right at the back here. There we are, that should be in about the right place. And I've just got this 1 foot by 4 foot softbox over the top of it. And I'm just going to get that a little closer. So we'll just drop that down. So it's like that. There. And there's just a small flash head in the top of this. Okay, so the next thing to do would be to set up that flash. And the way I'm going to do that is just by trial and error, really. So initially I'm just going to turn this one off and we'll just have the back one on and see what sort of result we get. So I'm getting some effect. You can see there's a tiny blue glow at the top here, but it's not very much. So I need to add a bit more energy to that. So I'm going to add 3 stops of energy, which I can do from the camera control here. So I'll just select that flash. We'll add 1, 2, 3 stops of energy. And I'll just grab that again. There we are. That's looking quite nice now. And the reason it looks like this is because the flash is very close to the background. So the inverse square law is literally causing the graduation down the back here. So I think with that done, we're now ready for a test with the bubbles. So I'll just start up the air pump, there we go, and we'll have another test. I'll use the software to trigger the camera, as I don't want to risk moving the camera. Okay, so I can see from that it is a little bright, like I thought. So I'm just going to take 2 stops off the energy of this flash. So I'll just go into the flash control. That flash is selected, and I'll just take 2 stops off it. 1, 2. And we'll grab that again. There, that's the sort of thing, that's much better. Feasibly I could go down a little more. This is what we had before, and this is what we've got now. So the next thing to do would be just to look at the actual positioning. I can probably afford to move the camera quite a long way up. So that's the next thing I'm going to do, and I can use the center column on the tripod to do that. Just wind it up to about there somewhere. Just quickly check that in the viewfinder. Okay. And we'll see what we get this time. Yes, that's looking much better. So I've got a nice graduation in the background, and I'm getting lots of nice bubbles. The exposure doesn't look too bad. Excellent. Okay, so for the preliminary tests, that's about it. Next thing to do is just to make use of the randomness, and we'll just grab a few images and just see what we get. And a very important last image to capture is just a blank slate, or basically just the background without any bubbles in it. It'll make it a lot easier to do the post-production when we go to Photoshop. So what I'm going to do, just without the bubbles going through, I'll just capture an image. There, and that's just given me this blank background. Okay, so with all that now captured, it just remains to go into Photoshop and do the post-production. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop, and from the multitude of pictures that I captured, this is the one that I've decided to go forwards with. And besides this, I also have the blank slate, which was the last image that I got. This is just purely the background. So what I need to do is just make a stack of those 2 images. And the best way to do that, I think, is just to go to File, come down to Scripts, load files into Stack, just ask it to add the open files. Just click on OK. There we go. Photoshop has now made me a stack of those 2 images and put them on separate layers, so I can now dispense with the camera originals. I can always go back to those if I need to. Right. So with that in place, the next thing to do would be just to address all the various bits that I don't want in the image. There's a lot of particles in the background, and there's 1 or 2 very small bubbles that I just don't need, I don't think. So the way to do that is just to add a layer mask to this top layer. So I'll just do that. And therefore anything that I now paint in black on this layer mask will hide that result and bring through the background. So just making sure that black is selected as the background color. Grab a paintbrush, and we'll just start off with a relatively large paintbrush like this, and very soft, and I'll just paint down the side just like that, just to illustrate what it can do. I'll do the same on the other side, and now hopefully if I enable and disable the mask, you can see the difference that has made. There we go. So we'll just carry on with that for a little bit. Just get rid of some of the smaller bubbles and some of the bits that I generally don't want. So as I start to go into detail in the image, what I can do is just zoom in a little. Just hold the space bar down just to pan. I'll go back to my brush, and at this magnification it's possibly a little big, so I'll just make it a bit smaller. And we'll just take out some more bits and pieces just to consolidate the image. Now I'm doing this relatively quickly. You could take some more time and some more care, but you get the idea. So I'll just zoom out, and this is what I had before, and this is what I've got now that I've done that little bit of retouching. So it's just cleaned it up somewhat. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is just look at a crop. So I'll just use the cropping tool here. I'm going to put in a specific ratio of 16:9, and I think I'll just tidy it up a little by just bringing in the top there and a little bit on this side as well. Something like that. And there we have it. So by applying some relatively simple lighting techniques, and together with a little bit of Photoshop manipulation, I've ended up with quite a pleasant little art image, I think. And all in all, I think that's worked rather well. Okay, well I hope you liked watching how I made that image, and if you like watching these sort of things, do click on the other images as they appear, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Thank you very much for watching.